I'm going to call this work session for the City Council for October 16th to order and call the roll. Or just announce who's here. Bennett.
Oi.
Cook.
Lewis.
Nanke.
And staff to be identified later. Okay, we'll go on our tour, correct?
Can I take just a second to
Sure.
set it up while we're all
I'm
here,
sorry.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
So, Alan Dannon from Public Works, for those who don't know me. We're going to take advantage of the daylight and do a quick tour of the facility, walking around. If you haven't received one already, we have maps that kind of show our route so you can orient yourself on where we are. I got nominated to be the tour guide. I just
Wow.
finished a college campus tour with my son this weekend, and this lovely young lady, very knowledgeable, walked backwards and told us about the campus the whole time. I
We're
won't
counting
be doing
on
that,
you.
or I'll fall on my head. So we'll just try to move to key spots, talk quickly, and make our way around. Mark Bechtel, the operations manager for Public Works, is here, and he can help answer questions. And I know Ty Godfrey is going to be joining us from facilities as well, so they can help with those questions. Real quickly, the objectives that we want you to see as we're walking around is, one, just the existing conditions of the facilities. Many of these buildings are 40 years or older, and they're at the end of their useful life. I know that Ty quoted me a figure of something like $300,000 a year in maintenance that they spend just kind of keeping this place band-aided together. Another is parking. It's the end of the day when everybody is in from their work for the most part, so you'll see that vehicles are shoved in any available space to try to make the most use of the limited parking that we have. And then the last is just be thinking about how the space might be used more flexibly and more efficiently, and that's something we'll be talking about when we talk about the master plan. I think much like the police, over the years working in a small area, they found ways to just try to take advantage of every square inch of space, and I think the Public Works and other users out here have done the same. But a big picture look might help us use the space more efficiently and more flexibly as we start to think about buildings coming down and moving pieces around. So keep all that in mind, and then we'll meet right out in front and start our tour.
Okay, any questions? Okay.
So real quick, we're starting in front of Building 2. This is where Public Work Administration and a lot of the supporting functions for the Public Works happens. Many of you may have heard about the ongoing issues with this building. There's been structural issues. There's been dry rot in the beams. You can see the exposed beams have a green cap on them where they had to actually trim them off and try to cover up the dry rot. I think there's still a structural concern if there's enough snow on the roof of this building that it probably shouldn't be occupied. So that gives you a sense of the kind of shape that it's in. And this is definitely one of the first things that we'd look to replace.
And this
with
is the administration.
This is the administration.
And this is the building that we run our snow and ice program out of.
Right.
So, yeah, Ty was here. Ty, there's a certain number of inches of snow or ice, and we have to vacate the building.
Yeah.
So,
We used to have snow blowers for the roof on one of our buildings.
All right, so we're gonna work our way around towards the sign shop and back through some of the transportation areas and take a look at some of their storage and work areas.
this is where we make the signs for the city. But it is actually in one of the better condition buildings that we have.
I was going to say this is one of the nicer workspaces out here, and if you could reinforce it in place, it might be something you'd consider. But the other item, or one of the other items that needs to be addressed as the site redevelops, is the floodplain elevation. And so this spot in itself or building here in this spot would need to be raised to meet that elevation. So although we could probably make this space work as is, everything else around it is going to get moved up higher, and so in the end, this building would need to raise to that level as well. So I think it works pretty well for the signs and sweeping operation now, but over time, it's going to need to get replaced to match the rest of everything else out here.
And this room here is where they actually make the signs. And we make all of our standard signs for the city. Specialty signs we send out for. So all your street signs, traffic signs, warning signs, informational signs.
Are you limited on space on what you're able to make?
I've arrived at,
They're pretty good here.
They're pretty good
They're
here?
pretty good. We have a team of people that go around pretty much every day replacing worn out signs or damaged signs. So,
You can see every spare spot out here where a vehicle will fit. they get parked at the end of the day. Parking is at a premium.
This is the old septic receiving station for septic haulers.
Oh.
We now receive at out at the waste processing center by the airport. But so this
So we'd take it here and then
they
transfer it?
dump here, that it'd be metered, and then it'd go on a pipe to Willow Lake.
So this facility can go away now.
It's mothballed.
Right.
Just in case.
Sort of
To spare.
This building here is one of the oldest buildings in the shops. It's the one that we joke about that it stays up because the termites are holding hands. But it's where we store our barricades and all of our sign materials and paint materials.
Oh, there's a timeout here.
DEQ, hazardous materials,
Yeah, I was gonna
eyes
say.
on, hazardous waste, very nice.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good example of where our crews store materials. Sometimes they have a little bit of workspace in a spot like this, and there's lots of these little bays where they work out of. And one of the things we're thinking about is how to
Tour
make
the shops
that space more flexible and
council.
efficient for both storage
and
and
selected luminaries.
And
on-site work.
This is your hazardous waste disposal on site right here?
Looks like at least one of them.
Okay. And this is the paint test area?
This is the paint test area.
Reflective, non-reflective? Can we flashlight it or?
This is the concrete shed. This is where the concrete team works out of. So the sidewalk repair team, the utility concrete team, our new flying squad. This is the building that they work out of.
So you staff the flyers.
It is staffed. It is working. Yes. So we now have 3 concrete repair teams.
Is this the one doing the job on Ford Street?
That's the big team.
It's the big team.
That's the ground team, not the flying team.
Yeah. The sidewalk repair team is the larger team, and they're the ones that are kind of deliberately going from neighborhood to neighborhood. The flying squad is the 2-person team that can grind and patch and fix individual locations. And then our own utility cuts into the concrete quite a bit, and so we have a team of people that make the concrete repairs whenever we have to dig up a trench in concrete. So.
This way to the signal shop. So the signals crew is one that needs, you can see they need some bench space to take care of equipment, do maintenance, that kind of thing.
That's a signal controller box.
Yes.
So when you see these on the side, this is what controls the signal.
Ah, okay.
And so these are basically industrial computers that that manage the timing, and then there is communications equipment, and then a whole lot of other cool electronic stuff that I have no idea.
You take that car and roll it through to see how fast it goes.
Let's take turns running red light.
So, but that's what allows us to time them, do 8 and 10 and 12 different timing plans a day.
This is it for the city?
No. This is every signal, every
See
intersection.
the cabinets at the intersection?
Every
This is
intersection
what
has
they
a
look
cabinet.
inside.
I
Like
didn't
this.
recognize it without the graffiti.
Right, exactly.
Ah.
Exactly. See?
When you do
Connected with fiber.
the syncing so that if someone's traveling under the speed limit, they can hit the greens on a slower area, is that more to link them or is that done here? or
That's done downtown.
downtown?
Yeah, at the traffic control center.
Okay.
Is they implement timing for the system, but every signal then has an industrial computer and equipment.
You can see we're in the midst of the relamping project for LEDs. So that's why there's pallet loads of LED streetlights here.
We talked a little bit about floodplain elevation and the where buildings will have to get adjusted to the current floodplain elevation if we rebuild them. The other challenging part about this site, or another challenging part about this site, is there's actual floodway that runs through here, mapped floodway, and it basically follows the streets and the cut-throughs between the driveways. So we'll need to keep those clear and have to adjust the elevations of everything else so that we don't restrict those floodways and that we can't build anything or restrict those in any way. So just another constraint that we have to work around out here.
And if a flood were to happen, these buildings where the maintenance and operations are occurring would be,
It'd be problematic, yeah.
Yeah, the talk about like the 96 event was there was water out here, but it wasn't super deep. So the
Probably
intrepid
move
souls
out.
could
We
make
were,
it
we were
in.
able to continue operations even during the 96 flood.
Yeah.
One thing, this antenna that you see there is the antenna that receives all the telemetry for all of our water and sewer pump stations, reservoir levels, flow monitors. The entire utility is controlled and received from that antenna that's attached to a building that is fragile. And so we are in the process of moving the control room and the antenna and all the hardware over to the facilities building that's directly in front of you. That's seismically stable and much newer, and that will assure that after an earthquake or even a snowstorm or a windstorm, we can control our utility, which right now is a little tenuous where it's at. So go in these, but the buildings all the way down here are technical spaces. This is where the water meter shops are, where we rebuild and repair the water meters, both residential and commercial. The buildings down at the end are where the sewer flow monitoring meters are repaired and maintained. We have to have an idea of what's flowing in our sewer pipes to know how to manage the system, and so it's not the world's best job, but somebody has to repair them. These modulars have been here for a long, long time. Our stormwater program is run out of these modular buildings. We simply, when we take you in building 2, you'll see that we literally have people up in the attic spaces working, and that's our overflow, is the modular buildings there. So straight ahead is facilities, and Ty Godfrey is the facilities manager here for the city. That's where he works out of, and the police communications bay is there as well. Parks operations. This building is similar to building 2. It has the same restrictions as far as snow loading, ice loading. It has the same issues with rot on the roof beams. So it's roughly the same challenge we have with building 2.
An unreinforced block.
Yeah. The down line for equipment needing work is here. On the other side of the building is the ready line, meaning the equipment has been serviced and ready to go. And so that's fleet. Modern fleet buildings are pull-through design. This is an old design where we have to pull in, back out, pull in, back out. And all the fire engines for City of Salem and Marion County District Number 1 and sometimes Kaiser are all serviced here. So.
Ty, I think the fuel island's at the floodplain elevation, right?
Correct.
So that gives you a sense of
How much higher?
how much higher it's got to be. And one of the things you'll see in the master plan is this fuel island stays where it's at. It would be pretty expensive to relocate. So we'll try to leave it here and focus some other like uses around it.
This is our material storage area. So we have pipe stored over here, obviously, and then all the different types of aggregate, bark mulch, cold mix for asphalt, pipe bends. This is a relatively new building here. It's our sand shed. It's for snow and ice. It's actually not sand. It's actually number 10 minus rock. But this is where this is our headquarters in the wintertime right here. The building right next to it is where we store our snow plows and sanders and de-icing equipment. So this is the snow and ice area right here. This over here is the warehouse, central stores, and those are brand new fire hydrants just waiting for somebody to hit an old one, a new one go in. And off to your left is that's a Quonset building that I think holds surplus now.
And obviously the contractor. So this is for our crews to use. So yeah, so you can just kind of sneak a peek at come on in so you can sneak a peek at the warehouse. So when crews are going out for the day, we actually pre-purchase a lot of things. We can buy them in large quantities to save money, and then the crews actually, purchase them out of here so that it gets assigned, cost accounted to the right budget. So there's a wide variety of materials here, so you can just kind of take a quick peek around and you can see. But everything is managed in and managed out, so there's no, actually very carefully done.
Swings. Parks. How cool is that? This must be for cleanup, for litter.
These buildings you see over here are some of our newest buildings. They're buildings that can be moved. They're modern enough and they're new enough that they actually could be moved to other places.
10 years?
10, 12
Since
years.
I've been here, so the
Yeah.
last 10
Yeah,
years or
they're,
so.
they're relatively new.
Yeah.
So the only issue with these buildings is some of them need to just get up a little higher. So, and they're sort of in the way. So you'll see in the presentation that some of them just have to be
They are movable.
reconfigured,
Yeah.
but they're right.
As
Yeah.
far as location, is this a good spot to be able to plan for the city for access to railroad and to other lines,
Yeah,
or is this
yeah.
not a good spot?
No,
Would you
this
rather
this
look
is
at an ideal place?
this is really an optimal place for city shops. We're centrally located in the city, so the only downside is the floodway issue. Otherwise, it's a great place to be centrally located. What you see right in front of you, this is our liquid magnesium chloride de-icer tanks. This is what keeps us moving in the wintertime, is this material. All these tanks are beyond their useful life, and so we were getting new ones installed this year. And that's actually, they're gonna be larger, so we'll have more material available to us. So that's one improvement we are making this year, is larger tanks. If you look right to your right is a beautiful oak tree, but also is 23rd Avenue. And so on the other side of the street is where we have 11 different fast food restaurants for our crews, okay? And more storage space, outdoor storage space. That's where we store our Vactor trucks. Each Vactor truck, the world's largest vacuum truck, and they each cost $400,000, so we like to keep them under storage. So
Vacuum truck.
they clean out the sewer pipes. Yeah, the big giant vacuum trucks.
So when the sand goes down for winter, that doesn't get vacuumed back up?
The street sweepers sweep it up.
They get swept up.
Street
That's what-
sweepers?
We're gonna lay it down and then we're gonna sweep it all back up.
What you don't usually hear much of is usually you'll hear how much sand we put down.
Not
What you don't hear is that we work 24/7 to get it all back up again the very next day.
within a few pounds?
I just have to get
No.
it off my sidewalk fast
Yeah.
enough to where
We don't get it all up the
Get
very next
back
day,
in
but
the
we
truck.
start working on it the very next
And
day.
you
to get it
guys
all up.
go through the bike lanes? That's part of the
Yes.
plan too, to get it out of the bike lanes?
Yep, we do.
blowing out of people's windshields and
Yeah.
Yes.
So as we circle back around, you'll see there's some relatively free of building empty space out here to the north. And that's important when you start thinking about, okay, how would we start making changes on this site? You got to have some empty space to move or to start with something so that then you can take down something else, because we have to keep operating, right? So we need a facility for people to move into before we can demolish old ones. So that'll be key to that strategy when we start looking at phasing.
Those are empty paint barrels for striping.
And you've got bigger rock chunks? Are these also for the bioswales, or what are these for? Part of a
They
road
could be for
construction?
whatever purpose we need them. We have different grades of rock, so
Multi-use rocks?
yeah. So it could be bioswales. It could be for rebasing a street.
Okay.
It could be for armoring a stream where we're allowed to do that. So I mean, there's just any place we need over a certain number of people in a crew, you have to have a toilet available to them. So and then parks, we have see the line of portable toilets there. We lose about 2 or 3 portable toilets a year to vandals. They burn them down to a little lump, and so we keep extras. And some of those were purchased for the Eclipse, so we will.
Will you be selling them, or will you
No, we'll
keeping
use them. We'll use them. Yeah.
All right, we're ready to start making our way back.
This is the wash racks. We wash out the street sweepers after every shift. Every dump truck gets washed out every night. So this is another thing that has got to be thought about when you're thinking about a new shops complex. This is another support service you got to deal with. Is the wash rack area.
And this is right in the way. So that's one of the things we have to deal with, is to
Right in the way.
right in the way of making the site work more efficiently. So we will we have a replacement facility or a duplicate facility, more modern, out at the construction waste facility
So
site.
when you say it's right in the way, it's a little bit bigger than you would need for your vehicles?
Yeah, and just really right in the way of being able to
Put a new building.
put a new building in. And
That's our recycling center over there. This is all of our long vehicle storage. And that's really important in a shops complex. You gotta have room to pull long trailers, backhoes, excavators, milling machines, rollers, pavers, and they all have to be hooked up to block warmers so that in the wintertime we can start all these diesel trucks in the morning. Every store in Salem is represented there, so you know.
Do they ever come out and pick them up?
Welcome to come pick 'em up.
Some do, some don't.
I don't see any from LifeSource. I counted those ways.
Didn't the restaurant association or the grocery
I
association
thought
have
that they
a?
used to charge for the shopping
that I'm
carts.
aware of.
Quite a few shopping carts.
Alan, you want to talk about employee parking on the north?
Yeah. So this is one of the main employee lots on the other side of the fence here. And you'll see again, there's a potential expansion area on the north side of that that's under different ownership right now, but would make a good opportunity to expand our parking. And there's another fairly good size, when we first came across the street, there's another fairly good size employee lot clear down on the south.
The number of staff we need is based on the programs we do, not the buildings, but just having fewer buildings would mean fewer furnaces, fewer redundancy, yeah, so.
And then, so in the 70s, the population of the city, we've grown so much.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
why
tremendously,
you've been.
yeah.
The other end.
And you know, we continue to grow. I mean, every budget year you see we add a few people to Public Works. And the challenge is, okay, where do we put them, you know?
Put the staff,
the
you
staff,
mean? Not
yeah.
with-
And then, Alan, I think we want to give them a little bit more of a tour of building 2.
Sure.
Yeah.
But before we do that, you'll see dispatch right here as we walk in. Any other questions about what we saw or anything like that while we're out here and the sun is still shining? Special thanks to Mark for ordering the good weather. Okay, we'll take a quick jaunt through building 2 and then
This is, like I said, staff 24/7, and at least one person, sometimes 2 or 3 people. And we dispatch all of our crews out of here, water, sewer, storm, streets, and parks, and spill response. And these folks are quite busy. We run a 24/7 operation. We have people on call or on duty 24/7, in all those 5 infrastructures. So it's this place is never really ever totally quiet. So, this is the control room that we want to move because it controls the entire utility. So it's just computers. But this is the one room that we do not want to see destroyed in the city if you want to drink water or flush your toilet. So this is why this is our number 1 priority, to get that hardware out of here.
And it's staff? It's staff? He's under?
Yeah, there's usually somebody in there all the time.
Shorter people. That was the window height.
This is the water offices.
GIS support?
This is one of our newer work areas. This is our technical services people, and they keep us, you know, up and running with our monitoring systems, our GIS systems, all the technical stuff that we have to deal with. 250 employees. That's the size of our lunchroom.
It's hard to lose the paper mats.
No,
They never crash.
Reliable
They never
records.
crash.
Absolutely.
If you go up these stairs, you'll see where we cram people in the attic.
This is environmental services. I've been up there numerous times.
These are our industrial pretreatment. You know our people.
Yep,
Yeah.
I've been up here many times.
Industrial pretreatment is run out of here. Spill response.
Find out what all the rest of it.
Permit compliance. We have, I think, 6 people work up here.
I'm sure I could work up here.
Six.
Desk, yeah.
I don't think this would work for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're
So we have
special kind
a.
of person to work
So
here.
this is our industrial pretreatment, permit compliance, spill response.
Yeah. Yeah, they used to be down the street next to.
Stuffing and mailing, but every single bill is printed here first, and then it goes out every day. I'm happy to report that we're not printing the paperless bills here.
When'd you figure that out?
Just so you know.
That's why he's the boss.
Those are not printed here.
Now you've got a chance to get oriented with the site, our plan is to kind of talk through the work that we've done and where we're going from here. But first, a little bit more background about the site. So back in 2003, the city actually did a master plan for the shop site, and that gives me an opportunity to introduce our consultants. So Henneberry Eddy Architects did that work, and Alan Osborne is here. He was part of that original master plan, and he's assisting us with the update. Also, we have Kirk Sun from CB2 and Carl Roth from CB2 who are working on the update here tonight. And they'll be doing most of the presentation here. In 2008, and that was about the time I got to the city, Public Works had plans and money saved to do a new operations building to essentially replace the function that you see here and also provide updated crew briefing spaces. And we had about $14 million saved in cash for that project and got through 60% design with Arbuckle Caustic, and we're on our way to final design and putting the project out for bid when the Great Recession happened, and that really changed our financial picture there for several years, and that cash had to get reallocated to deal with that. So the project kind of went into stasis, and here we are almost 10 years later. The issue really resurfaced when we were working on the police and civic center issue, and the questions came up, well, what about, we know there's issues out at the shops, what about that? And so that's when we brought CB2 and Henneberry Eddy back on board to update the master plan and start talking about where to go from here. And I guess the other thing I would highlight there is a lot has changed in those 10 years. That was before Parks was part of Public Works. Now Warehouse is also part of Public Works. And I think there's a lot, the way Public Works works is has evolved. And that's what you'll see in some of the master plan concepts that we're working on. Flexible buildings and more efficient use of space instead of each department has its own little siloed area.
I had a question. Is it okay to ask questions now? Will this commit us on the long term to Parks always being part of Public Works by having this occur out here? Okay. Parks was out here before? Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, even though Parks wasn't part of Public Works when I first started working on that operations building project, we were looking for a way to incorporate their space into that building, because it makes sense regardless of how we're organized that there's a lot of common uses there and overlap between that it would make sense to be together. So our objectives today, one, to become familiar with the site. Hopefully we've done that. And then Kirk and Alan will go over the draft master plan and how it's phased. And then once they get to the end of that and have kind of had a chance to show you how it works, again, feel free to ask questions as we go along. And I think Peter's going to lead the discussion of what the next steps will be. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kirk, and this is how the site looks today.
Thank you, Alan. So this is the same map that handed out to you guys, showing little arrows that we were walking around. So if you do have questions as we're talking, I can click on some of these pictures and it'll take you to that spot. So to jog your memory, I can do that. So if you have a question come up. So we'll kind of jump into several of the challenges that you probably saw while we were walking around out there. The deficiency on the buildings probably should have been at the top, because I think that's the biggest factor that we see walking around the buildings and talking with Public Works. The parking not being adequate and being mixed around is the other component to an inefficient site. And then the other challenge, looking at the opportunities for future growth. So what other parcels seem to have a good proximity that would create more efficiency for this development here. So we had some of the key goals for starting the master plan, consolidating public works office space. So we're in building 2 here, and then Parks is in 14 crossed over here. So bringing these together, bringing public works from the Salmon Run building, bringing them out to this campus. And then also the workshop space. So traffic signals that we walk through, bringing them and putting them adjacent to other crews that may use the same tools or similar tools, so that workspace can be shared to create more efficiency there. Safety and security is one I'll show you, along with the site circulation. I've got a diagram to kind of explain how we looked at that. Providing space so that there is some modest growth within the building, so that as a facility it actually has some projection of 30, 40 years on the building. Adequate parking, so along with bringing all of the staff that are currently parking over at City Hall or at Salmon Run, all those employee cars are going to be parked here now. So look how we look at all of the staff parking. And then also just the flexibility and functionality of the site, creating more usable spaces. So this is a diagram, and again, all of these slides are in your packet. So if you want to follow there or on the screen. The red lines show the key areas as we analyze looking at pedestrian traffic. So this space here, this light blue, this would be the new central shops building. So this would be the administration building, 2 stories, that would house building 2, building 14, and a lot of others.
That's where the folks from Salmon Run.
Correct.
And all of City Hall would be moved here as
Yeah.
well. Okay.
Yeah.
Potential first floor addition would be for.
So as we're refining the building program, which is kind of the next step after the master plan, we see that as an area that if the building need to get a little bit bigger on the first floor, because similar to police, everybody wants to be on the first floor. So footprint wise, we're having a challenge of fitting everything on site. So the other kind of component was looking at staff parking is up in the upper north portion up here where my cursor is. So looking at ways to bring staff safely down into the building and creating the nodes for pedestrian, rather than, as we did today, you kind of just wander around through drive aisles and when you're actually out here, when trucks are driving around during the workday, you're constantly dodging because there's a lot of activity going on. So focusing on trying to create pathways for people to go. And the other component was vehicular. So right now, you probably saw some of the gates, but there are quite a few gates, and they're entry and exit. There's not a hierarchy to the path of travel. So that was another component as we looked at entry gates, like this one up here, where some of you may have come in off 22nd. It'd be far enough in to where a truck and trailer could pull in, and if the gate was closed, they could get off the street. And then also looking at exit gates can then be up closer to the street because the car is parked on the inside side of that.
Kirk, if I could add, I think one thing about this site that is kind of crystal clear is that it's well behind sort of industry best practices for safety. And so, as the city, I think that's something that you should all be very concerned about. And so a lot of the effort here went to, provide pathways for pedestrians and separation of people from the personal vehicles from the fleet vehicles. So you'll see a lot of emphasis on that.
Go ahead.
Topographically and the floodplain,
Mm-hmm.
is this including lifting the buildings up, or did you look at the sites?
So I'll show you at the end. I have a slide that can show you where the floodway map is in relation to these buildings. But yes, all of these buildings would be brought up as they were developed.
Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
Would those entry gates be secured during the day as well? Because even if you can get one rig in there, when folks are coming in first thing in the morning, and what have you, you'd probably still have their tail end hanging out in the street, so.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of an operational type component, and yeah.
Yes, Counselor, we very much would like to have fewer entrances and exits that are actually power gate operated. The best practices in the industry are that you want your work areas and your maneuver areas to be secure, and maybe just have a public area that's accessible directly from maybe like 23rd Street or something. But we have way too many gates that are open way too long that are not monitored. So we'd like to have fewer gates and more power gates.
Thanks, Mark. So this is the final master plan, and I'll come back to this again at the end. But I wanted to kind of give you the picture of this is where we're going. So this would be phase one, and these right now these are kind of big, fluffy phases. There's nothing set in stone with these, and that's part of kind of talking with you guys, because a lot of it probably revolve around what can be bid off financially to move along the process. So the maroon kind of color with the white outline are ones that would be demoed and removed. The ones with the purple with the white outline, those are relocated ones. So as you walked around the tour, there was a mention of a couple buildings that are newer in the last 10 years and could be removed or moved to a new location. So all the blue are existing currently where they stand. So phase one would be more or less clearing the area up here so that the ops building could be placed. So we'd be moving these three, 33, 35, and 36 down to the southern portion of the site to start creating that efficiency of getting the buildings along the edge and allowing more truck driving area.
Would you do this in the spring so that the de-icers, or would you do it in the winter while they're out?
No, you would probably move them when they're not being used. Yeah. And this is, so the de-icer would be one of those removed. And so right here, these three dots over here by the fuel station is actually where the de-icers would move to. So phase two is, there's a lot that changes in phase two, and that's partially because the building would be the main part of phase two, along with starting all of the adjacent site work so that you have the parking for staff and the like. And actually, I'll jump back real quick. So we talked about those other parcels available for future expansion. So up here on the north, we looked at this parcel as one, and then on the south, this parcel here and the parcel over here that kind of is landlocked around the current site. So those seemed as viable locations just based on adjacency and proximity to the other services that we were moving around. So this would be the main shops building again, 2 stories. Currently we're showing about a 40,000 foot footprint, so 80,000 square feet, with the potential to add, if we needed to, as we get into the program of the building, a little bit more space with that wing. So right here off 23rd would be the entrance for the public. If the public was coming in, this is a non-gated driveway entrance that the public could come in, and there would be visitor parking right in the front of the building. The main entrance of the building would be around this area here on that angle. The yellow, which is kind of actually hard to see on the screen, but the yellow is the fence and gate areas. So there would be a gate right here that would allow staff to come up and park. So all of this northern portion of parking is staff parking. There's also a gate here that would allow access for some of the city vehicles to come in, because this lower portion here and this portion right here are what we're calling heavy trucks, utility trucks, and then down over in the south east portion is truck and trailers. So trucks hauling backhoes and such.
And most of the big vehicles would come in off of 22nd.
Yeah. So we have one of the entry gate that I spoke of right here in this spot. So they would come in and park like that. So as phase 2, the construction is happening for this building, and when it's finished, then building 2, 14, 6, and 7 could all come down because the people in this space that we're in now would move over into that building. So again, as Alan spoke when we were out there, having that kind of empty chair for everybody to move to and create that musical chairs, getting the shops building is one of the first dominoes to get all the other buildings going. The other component that we walked through, the warehouse, which currently sits in about this area here, would be relocated down over here where there was, Parks had some of the benches and such right over there. So again, putting it up against the edge, and then also having the ability that if this parcel was to be acquired, it could have outdoor storage that could be adjacent to the warehouse and have that same kind of control on it. So then phase 3 is the removal of sign, storage, traffic, signal up here, and buildings 15, 16, and 20 along the edge. And then we would be building a new shops building, which would actually have the work space for shop. And then building A, up on the top portion here, would be where storage, warehouse space, for all the components that currently were occupied in these buildings.
Question on that?
Yep.
How do you deal with all those functions in the interim? Because there's no new place for them.
Yeah, so if it's hard to say, we combined a lot of these phases because we had way too many phases, but if you look where these buildings would be demolished, this building would go in its place. So you could build building B before you tear down any of the north
16,
portions
20.
or west portions, yeah. So we did look at some of that kind of the baby steps so you weren't taking something out of commission that was being used. Now there may be some kind of temporary homing while other building gets demolished and set up, but there'd be, we tried to have very little of that.
I think another thing you see in this approach is more of a, instead of smaller individual buildings for each, department and sub-department, make them large and make a demising wall that can change as needs change over time. Because with the individual buildings, it's easy to become territorial, say that's my building, instead of this is a portion that I occupy in a building.
So with phase 3, again, finishing out buildings A, B, and then there's a small little portion over here where we're connecting buildings 34 and 35. So building 34 was actually designed to be added onto that direction. So filling in would be part of this phase. And then phase 4 would be the removal and then rebuild of the fleet building, providing a drive-through component for the shop, where you could pull a truck in and then drive it out the other side. So right now, the fleet building sits like this, where it has the one bay, and so creating more efficiency out of that. So this would be one of those that a temporary solution would need to be found to do that portion.
Do it in the summer.
So this takes us now back to, this is what the master plan would look like. Couple of things I can kind of point out. This pink area here is heavy truck garage. So this would be garage space where the equipment is very expensive that is on the truck or the truck itself. So they could be pulled in there and kept safe and secure from weather. The other, we have this kind of gray box down here, and then there's one up over here looking at the potential ability to add mini fuel stations, so that because we have a bulk of the truck and trailer storage parking down here, that seeing if there's a way to potentially have a small fuel station there. And that would be one of those that we'd have to vet with cost and if it makes sense or not. But it was one of the ideas. The other is the wash rack that we walked around over there. So it's moved down over here now. So trucks will be able to come in, and the discussion is, I believe Alan or Mark made the point about making it smaller. So it's more of a 2-ton and smaller, I think was our discussion, about the size of the truck. And then the bigger trucks would be out at the wastewater treatment plant.
The waste processing facility.
Yes, waste processing, sorry. So, flood map. So this is what it's currently mapped at. And so you can see it, those are elevations, like height elevation, so floodplain. So we're going down, so the difference from here, the 180 to 179, is a foot in height change of the grade of the site. So the water is going from here, coming this direction through the site. And I don't, Alan, know off the top of my head the depth to what this was mapped at, but it's inches, not feet.
Yeah, it's not
Correct.
terribly deep. And the other thing to remember is this is just floodway, so it's showing areas of water being transmitted during the flood event that we really can't restrict. Like we talked about when we were walking around, the whole site would probably have shallow depth of water across it, but these are the areas that are restricted for us to really work in. Keep in mind that the building footprints are conceptual, so we'd have to make those fit with the floodway.
So there's some of this up here where a building currently sits right there, the sign shop. So some of this mapping would need to be analyzed a little bit further as we develop the exact location of the new buildings.
And this takes into account the creek on the other side of the Mission?
Yes.
Right. In fact, this water is flowing from Pringle Creek to Shelton Ditch. So this is just when things flood, the water's heading from southeast to northwest.
Yeah, there's
What's
multiple
happening
overflow
at
points.
20th Street then? What's going on the part we can't see?
It runs vertical on it too. You can just barely see it. It got cut off right there though, but the blue line is kind
it's
of
running-
going up.
running
It's running. It's very similar to 22nd Street, where
Okay.
it runs.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe this mapping was done when 23rd was realigned. So
Right,
it's
and
fairly
it
current.
was part of the work we did for the original operations building is remapping that floodway with the idea that area north and
here.
I guess west of 23rd would be redeveloped.
Okay. Great.
So,
So-
how long is this whole process gonna take? Assuming enough that we get money and we're ready to go, and you start with the first building, when would you start? How long would it be till it's all finished?
I think Peter must have planted that question
Are we
with
ready
you.
to talk about
Yeah,
that?
sure.
Yep, we're done.
And what would it cost us then?
So we've been doing some thinking about this, and the first thing is money. The building. Do you have you want to talk about cost estimates real quick?
Sure.
So just give you a handle on what we're talking about.
Yeah, so as we were looking at the shops building, and this is just the building, not the site, not the unknowns we don't know about yet, but a rough idea of an essential facility, so similar to the police in the type of construction, because of the uses that will be in here. Looking somewhere between $25 to $30 million for the building.
And that's in today's dollars.
In today's
so if we're
dollars,
building
so
it this year.
no escalation, no contingency in that number, no soft cost in that number.
It's a master plan estimate.
It's a master plan estimate of that T-shaped rectangle up there.
So if you think about site work and all the other soft costs that Kirk mentioned, even in today's dollars, you're probably upwards of 40, 45, and then depending on how far in the future you build it, that number is going to grow.
So
For everything or just
For
that?
everything.
No, just the
That
building, just the T. Right. So, and we figure that each building move, like the move of building 36 and the move of building 35, is probably in the $250,000 to $500,000 range, because we gotta, there's the labor to take it apart. You gotta set a new concrete pad. It has to be set high enough. Whatever new wiring has to be pulled. So we think that there are early pieces that need to be done related to moving buildings. And can you go back to one of your earlier? Yeah. So for example, the move of building 36, the move of building 35, those things we can the purchasing of the certainly the north property, which might be simpler to do than some of the others that have really relatively good buildings on them. But those are things that we can budget for, assuming the master plan is, I don't know if we're going to ask you to adopt it, endorse it, something formal. We can start to fund some of these things. A lot of these buildings that have to move are utility buildings, so we can actually find funding to do that. And there's nothing wrong with moving the buildings and creating kind of that truck parking. So even if we couldn't find, other funding for a little longer, that investment isn't lost. The shop operates better anyway. So we're figuring that we're in a 4 to 6 year effort of funding some of these. There's sub phases to this phase one of moving buildings around, getting that done as we figure out how to find, because there's $40 million for that T building. Go ahead and go to, and then the warehouse. Right. So there's actually 2 buildings that have to be built right away. The T building and the warehouse building, so that we can clear the area to get that done. So what's some of the funding? So we sold our water rights, so there's $16.5 million on the way in. So that's a down payment. There is new transportation money. So, we have a lot of need in the community for maintaining and operating, but we could certainly start thinking about setting aside some of that money. And we'd literally be looking at, putting a pot together and saving money and hoping that 6 years from now, something doesn't happen that we have to spend it, but that we would start doing some saving. And that'll get us to an amount, 20 million, 16 million, 17 million, 20 million. And then we'll have to find the rest. And the rest is probably certainly for the parks component, for the rest of the streets component, probably some kind of borrowing to be able to get to this point right here, so that we'd have, the new shops building and the new warehouse building and 36 and 40 and 34 and 35. And then hopefully we've acquired the north area. I don't know about the south area, and I don't know about the outdoor storage. But at that point, we're significantly more modern. We certainly have a building that, and my concern is, given the shape of City Hall, and frankly, even with seismic rehab of City Hall, it's only a survivable building. It's not an operating building. So if you can envision that if we can move relatively quickly on this, now we'd have the police facility, this building, Willow Lake, are 3 buildings that the city could operate out of after an earthquake, even if City Hall is demolished. The citizens could still function. There'd be conference rooms. You could have council meetings here. So we'd want to move toward that. But it's a start next year by funding it, start moving some buildings around, and then steadily progress over 5, 6, 7 years to get to some point, and then go ahead to the go all the way to the end. So this is probably a 15 to 20 year plan realistically, because unless there's a very, very substantial bond issue that we'd want to do for that, and I just don't see that. But I'd see us getting to to the previous. So that's kind of the long-term plan.
Peter, to clarify, sorry,
The north property acquisition, did you say that you could do that through the budget?
Depending on what it costs. So if it's a reasonable cost, we might be able to do that through the utility fund. You know, I mean, at some point we have to do kind of an allocation plan, right? How many employees are utility employees versus how many employees are general fund employees, how many are streets employees. But I would foresee in the short term that because we have revenue coming into the utility from the sale of assets, that, you know, there's some money available to be able to do some, you know, the early, I would envision that the early funding would be utility, and then the later funding would be, I don't foresee the general fund putting money aside in the near future. Transportation budget could put a little money aside, or might be able to handle a little piece of some of the acquisitions or one of the building moves or something like that.
And if there are concerns from council or councilors regarding, acquiring additional property, that would be, a good discussion to have at some point, not necessarily tonight, but it's something to think about as.
So one of the issues, and I know Councilor Cook has had her hand up, so the biggest issue that the architects have struggled with is parking. And so to be able to fit everyone comfortably, and our initial idea, what I asked Alan and Kirk and Alan to think about is, could we move the entire department into it? Because from a managerial standpoint, that's what makes the most sense. And then back off from that. Nobody's kicking us out of City Hall, so we could certainly stay in the in the third floor. And frankly, with some redesign, engineering theoretically would be able to fit in City Hall and not at Salmon Run. But the limiter isn't, we can make that building as big as we want. The limiter is parking, staff parking. And that's the idea behind acquiring the parcel to the north. Kirk experimented with making that parking just north of that T building a parking deck. So a 2-story parking deck, and then we don't have to, but it's cheaper to buy the land than it is to build a parking deck. It concerns me, I've expressed that, we're taking property out of production, out of the private sector. But in the longer term, if that property became valuable and things began to redevelop, we could sell that property and then with those proceeds build a deck at some future time. So I think there's some opportunities when it's just parking as opposed to a building, that it would be an interim step. So,
will
Councilor
residents see any efficiencies if we have another winter this year like we did last year with the immediate fixes, the demolishing of the building, moving things around? What would residents be able to see for the benefit?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think when you look at where it says truck trailers, I think redesigning that area and moving the buildings down, I think would create an enormous efficiency in being able to park the vehicles, work the vehicles in and out. Certainly, being able to move in and out of the snow and ice area, in the short term. I think that's where the efficiencies.
But you wouldn't be getting any additional plows or adding different routes or timing?
No, and I don't think we'd be looking at that even with this. I mean, we run, the Salem, Oregon is it doesn't snow that much. So the question is how many do we have, and operate so that we can do stuff versus just having a lot of them sitting around for a long time, so we're constantly weighing that, for snow and ice. So now de-icing I think is a big deal for us, and so we're making some nice investments on the de-icing side, because I think we get a lot of use out of that. With Mark, right? So, yeah. Yes. No, I was going to kind of do a closing thought. So, yeah, more questions, please.
A couple. This now, I'm going back to my police building experience. And one of the first things that we were told on a consistent basis, the most efficient way to design the building is to be some kind of a rectangle rather than a T. So why is this a T if the most efficient way is a rectangle?
Yeah, part of it is because the function of this is a little bit different. So in this space, we have what we call crew muster areas. So staff's coming in, having their morning briefings, and then going out. So part of this was having this almost entire south portion of this building here is all crew areas. So the crew will be coming here, and then coming out to their vehicles. So proximity to their trucks where most of the work gets done.
Two rectangular buildings.
Yeah, well, yeah, sort of, but yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of locker room areas.
Yep. And then the upper portion here being locker room areas too, where staff comes in and then staff leaves.
Okay. So then the second one is cost again. So you said, I think I heard Alan say, this is 40,000 square feet, and it could be 50 or 55 million?
80,000, 40 times 2.
floors.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
2-story at 40,000.
Two-story, yeah.
Missed that.
I struggled with that the first couple of times I saw this map.
So, seeing as how parking keeps coming up, we did talk about on the walk that there used to be the employee bus reimbursement, different routes, and you'd mentioned the transportation dollars in place. Of course, some parking's inevitable. People have rigs that they're driving when they're here. What have you done to help make sure that we're being as efficient as possible with parking and not just wasting that space? I like what you were talking about before, where if you have the parking lot and then the land becomes available, it's like a savings account kind of
Mhm.
to be able to move
An investment,
things.
yeah.
Right. Could you talk a little bit about the parking efficiencies and what you've done?
Well, today, yeah, the efficiency is that we don't have enough, so people are dispersed. You know, they're parking out on Oxford Street and they're parking on 20th Street, and
Do you get
they're
complaints from neighbors?
no, because all of our neighbors are industrial. So I mean, there's a couple little houses, but I don't think we get any complaints. So employees have learned for years to park head in along Oxford. That's PGE property. South of Oxford Street, our southern
It's down on the
our
bottom,
southern
right-
boundary.
right down there.
Yeah, there. So employees know to park head in there instead of parallel. So so that's what we've done. We don't really have the bus route is up on Mission Street. One of the issues that we have here is this is a 6:30 to 3:30 shop. So people arrive very early. If you're here at 4 o'clock, there's virtually Mark's here, and the dispatchers are here, and at 4 p.m. Because people start really early. They start early and they end early.
Sure.
So it makes it tough. People can carpool, but it makes it tougher for transit or things of that nature, given this location.
Well, the access both on 20th and 23rd, as far as sidewalks and infrastructure and improvement, those also, I mean, you mentioned Oxford, a lot of those streets are just like with Public Works out here as far as crossing and whatnot. Have you looked at any of those or
For
improvements at the same time?
Yeah, so 23rd already has sidewalks on both sides. 22nd and 20th has sidewalks. Only Oxford doesn't have sidewalks. There is a project right now that is in design that we're funding. Council approved it. We're funding with Streets and Bridges Savings to create medians on 22nd Street, and that's been a long-term complaint / request from the safety committees that there's, we talked about, 100% of our staff is crossing that every day at some point, certainly every week, if not every day. So we want to make that safer. You saw that the street is narrow, so what that involves is moving the curbs back so that we can create a median and create kind of a space where traffic can see that this is a crossing area, and those are the kinds of things that we want to install. But that right there is a $400,000 project. That's the budget.
What can you kind of give me an idea of what your timeline now looks like and what your next steps look like?
Yeah. So assuming we kind of get like a thumbs up that we're headed in the right direction here, we'd be looking at a staff report to council late December, one of the meetings in December, with this master plan requesting an endorsement of the master plan.
What's your public outreach between now and then look like?
I had not planned to do a whole lot of it for the shop's master plan.
I think I would suggest at least Cessna.
Sure.
Get a look at
We
this.
can do that.
So we get some.
Sure.
Maybe putting it in the utility bills?
Well, let's see where I think maybe you need some time to think about how you'd like to do public outreach on this. I would hate to, in a way, I would kind of hate to have this come to council cold in December without some sort of public
Okay.
comment period or outreach.
And we can do an open house like we did with,
Sure.
you know, the.
Charrette.
Where we've done with a bunch of different.
And kind of just have a couple of bulletin boards up. to
We
show
certainly
people
we certainly can do that.
I think a couple open houses out here would be helpful too,
Sure.
if you could do them.
Sure.
I don't know what your capacity is for that, but I think that would be helpful to have had a number of people get a look at this.
4 o'clock.
Yeah, start at 4. And then you would be asking us to look at this master plan and say, this looks like a good idea.
Right.
And that would allow you to proceed with further
So what
planning?
you would then see? No, what we would start then is funding. So
And that would be
so,
in the next budget?
Right. So what you would see is with an adoption of the master plan, I would foresee that perhaps, I mean, I haven't started the budget yet, but I would foresee that we would start putting money in the utility budget to start doing some of these building moves. So you'd see,
But no impact on utility bills for this?
No. You'd see $500,000-$600,000 line items.
Okay.
To master plan implementation, to be able to, and we might even call out, master plan implementation, phase 1, moving building 36, for example, moving building 36 and paving, the truck trailer, or you could see Clint Dameron works his magic, and we're able to acquire the parcel. So you might see, some property acquisition money, and that would occur. I think you'd see those line items over, 3, 4, 5 years, and start to see projects. And then once we had a funding plan in place, that hey, this is I think you'd also see kind of a sinking fund account that would start, that would be called SHOPS master plan implementation, where you start to see the money build up in it, and then at some point, which is I think where we would do the more robust outreach, is hey, now we're going to go out for a bond, or we figured out a way to fund it without a bond, but that'd be the time then to really start talking about what does that new central building looks like, and what does it cost, and how's it being funded.
Well, I would just alert you to a couple of things I think I can see in this, which is the public outreach just on the lay of it, the design of it, and then also some sort of really clear public discussion of its impact on utility bills or other fixed, costs as a consumer. I'm paying as a consumer of city services. What are we talking about here in terms of impact on my bill? And where do those dollars come from that go into the sinking fund? I think you're going to have to be pretty explicit. I really do. I think if you don't, we'll hit a wall out there. I can see it.
Oh yeah. Oh no. I took a tremendous amount of grief over several budget committee meetings before the building was killed. Where several budget committee members didn't like it, and and then I spent several budget committee years afterwards when they kept asking me about the building, and I kept saying, but there is no building. Right. So
I'm thinking
understand
back to those hearings, and that's part of what I'm thinking of. But I'm also thinking about the discussion that went on around the police facility over the past couple of years, and learning from that, and that may be one of the things that CB2 can help us with, what you saw happening. I think everyone ought to take a close look, including debriefing the chief or Belshaw, and certainly having Alan. He saw every piece of it as it came at us. So I think making sure we learned from that process, that this process doesn't try to skirt any of that kind of involvement. I'm really cautious about it.
Yeah, and there's no intent to that.
No, I know there
whatsoever,
isn't,
so.
but I just want to alert you that I think we will expect that. If you were thinking of bringing it in December without some sort of public involvement that is meaningful, I think you might be coming too early.
Okay. We'll have to think about. I'm not arguing the
I
point
know
at
you're
all.
not.
We'll have to think about what exactly are we presenting, because I would also hate and I'm just processing.
Yeah.
I would hate for certain people to show up and say, my God, they're proposing a $40 million building, and it's you know, it's going to be in the next budget or whatever, and that's
No.
that's so
That's
we'll have
how- that's what you're gonna
we'll have
cut
to think
off.
about how we lay it out, that this is a
Right.
very
And that- it
long-term
takes-
process.
That takes some thinking. We
Yeah.
won't do it tonight on the fly, but you all, I think, know how to, what
Yeah,
happened
I
and how
appreciate
to
that.
handle that.
Appreciate the
You
comment.
know, at one point, being on the finance committee, we've talked about how we're gonna, in the future, what do we need to fund with bonds, and what
Yeah.
would they be, and how would we stagger them to mitigate the rating,
Right.
you know, so there's not sticker shock out there. And in there this is one of the ones that's included in the queue,
Yes.
Right.
where it falls or where we go along with it is there, but some of that's dependent on timing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what's the total cost gonna be, how are we gonna do that, how do we start it, is gonna sort of somehow dictate our strategy as we go through that whole
Yeah.
strategy.
I think this is really good. I
When we
think
plug
this
it
is a
in.
great beginning. I don't think we're yet there yet.
But yeah, so again, to the mayor's point, I think we need a little more clarity in total amount, sort of a when we're gonna do it, and I'm not hearing that right now, because we're gonna need it to have to develop
about
that
it.
strategy and plug it in and
What
go
will the
about getting it
realistic
done.
dollars at the time be?
Just to build on what the mayor said, when you were talking about saving the money to be able to pay for the costs out of capital, as part of that education or conversation with the neighborhoods, I can hear people saying, well, are they putting off parks? Are they putting off sidewalks? Is that being deferred so we can do this program? So making sure people know that you are still operating essential services, because, I mean, the concern is if something happens, we've lost all of these essential people and vehicles. We need this to be able to operate. So presenting the case that we're not forgetting about sidewalks and parks and
Of course, right.
important road projects.
And I think making a critical case here, and I thought you made it with, the part I'll remember is that antenna up against a building that will collapse or burn or whatever's going to happen out here that has so much critical information passing between this building and services I absolutely rely on. And that I think as a citizen, I need to know a strong case for what I'm getting. And what you're describing, I think, is really defensible as you describe this whole issue area, because this is what we're all about: water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, ice, de-icing, sanding. All of the pieces are here, and that they are in jeopardy at any given moment. We just went through it with the police station. We've been through it with the fire stations. We're going through it now with the library, and this is a really fundamental part of the infrastructure that is dicey, as you've presented it to us today. Made me real nervous. Yeah, Brad.
I like the layout, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask about property to the north of Sign Shop and how it compared, if you busted into a couple of different chunks, because it,
Salem Heating,
yeah,
they just renovated the property.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And as we looked at it, it was, as far as utilization, this property doesn't have a high utilization on it.
Right.
And this one down over here has a good business on it right now, but it is in a proximity, it's kind of landlocked. And then this one over here, Cherry City, years ago, Cherry City approached the city about selling, but maybe that's not the case anymore, but
Right.
at least there's the history there on that side.
Okay.
So I've often thought, when we were looking at our building 10 years ago, the Prudential was building, and
Right.
and we're I don't know, Health and Human Services, I think there's a state agency there across from the Shell and the Realtors, so this area has been developing, and I was hopeful that our building would incent more and nicer development. So if there was, there's sort of an alternate. If we didn't want to go to the north, the long forsaken apartments to the east have never come to fruition. So that's an opportunity, again, just strictly for parking, given the airport issues and stuff. Now we'd have, employees crossing the street, but, I mean, there's compromises, we just have to be okay with compromise, one way or the other. If the property to the north, was redeveloped into something really cool, well, then maybe we could go east.
Right.
So.
Would that be more specialized then with like the large truck?
No, it would be for
Trailer
employees.
package.
As would be my sense is we put employees over
It's
there.
7 o'clock, and I guess what I'd suggest is you understand the kind of things we'd like to hear
Right.
more of. Certainly, well in advance of a December decision, any kind of decision point's going to need some
Yeah.
advance work, and we may need another work session just to talk it through some more.
I think that'd be a good idea.
And get public out and do it at City Hall and make sure we're open. Yeah.
Just one other, because we have broached the subject of purchasing property on both sides. Do those property owners know anything about it before this goes on the air?
Probably
Just-
a good
just a
idea,
thought.
so we're not, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We should
Okay.
make
Well, you've
contact
got a
with
lot
them
of
quickly.
stuff
Yeah,
to do, and,
yeah.
and thank you very much. This was really informative, really appreciated. If that's okay, I think I'll adjourn us. Is that okay?
That's perfect, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.